That summer, when the river ran clear and lilac hung over the fence, I learned to listen. The house of my grandparents crouched at the edge of a village where the road wore down to whispers in dust. Grandmother kept her kitchen as if it were a small, patient cathedral. The kettle singing when it met the water, potatoes dressed in their brown skins, onions laid out like little pale suns, and the clock on the wall counting out the day with soft, unhurried ticks. The world smelled of rain that hadn't fallen yet, and bread cooling on a rack, of something sweet drying on herbs in the window. I was thin with summer, all thumbs and questions, hungry for a sign that the vast quiet of the countryside could belong to me as much as to the trees. On the third morning, I found a blue bicycle behind the shed, its paint chipped to the colour of old bottle glass, and the basket still damp from last rain. It wore the weight of 100 summers, and none of them mine. The handlebars smelled faintly of rubber and lemon soap, as if someone in another life had wiped away the day with a half-sweet promise. The lane that stretched from the yard to the village lay like a ribbon, sun-warmed and patient, flanked by cornfields already tall enough to be carried away by the wind. I mounted with a tremor in my knees that was half fear, half joy. The gravel made a little peal of sound under the wheels, and the air came at me in heavy green breaths. Cicadas hammered the afternoon into a slow drumbeat, and the world, for a long moment, held its breath to see what I would do. Grandfather's voice came from the porch, steady and calm as a lighthouse in a hazy harbour. Steady now. Look where you want to go, not where you've been scared to go. His words didn't scold so much as anchor. I folded that advice into the motion of pedalling, and the bicycle found its rhythm. The lane opened to the sunlight in patches, a checkerboard of heat and shade, and I learned to ride between the lines of shadow, as if they were fences I could step over with a tilt of my wheels. The smell of warm dust rose, mingled with the tang of growing things, the sweet, stubborn green of corn leaves, the damp underleaf, the faint sweetness of lilac that seemed to rise from the very ground and climb into the blue of the sky. After a time, I slowed at the end of the lane, where the road widened to a small bend that looked toward the lake. The lake lay there like a quiet promise, a strip of mirror that held the sky in its palm. A thin boat scraped gently against the pier, and dragonflies wheeled in slow, smoky ovals above the water. I pushed the bicycle to the shore and steadied the basket, listening to the hush behind the trees, the sighing breath of the old house, the distant cluck of a hen, the soft, patient rustle of leaves. I climbed into the little boat, the same one grandfather had patched with a stubborn white seam where the wood had learned too many seasons. The water lapped at the hull with a polite insistence, and the lake drew a long, cool breath as if to test me. I rolled the paddle between my palms, the rough wood rough against my skin, and I pressed off from the bank. The first few strokes were uncertain, a wobble of nerve and curiosity, and I watched the shore creep away as if the world itself were backing into a corner to let me have this moment alone. The middle of the lake felt like stepping into a new room with all the windows open. The water held a pale, glassy light, not cold, but not warm either, and the surface shimmered with tiny, patient ripples that asked no hurry from me. A dragonfly settled on the oar where it crossed the water, a blue-green dot that blinked its own quiet wisdom. A fish flashed beneath the hull in a moment of bright, winking silver, and then vanished, leaving the lake to exhale a current so soft you could hear it if you leaned your ear to the hull. I found a rhythm, paddle, pause, listen, and the rhythm did something to me. loosening knots I did not know I wore inside my chest, a fear of falling, a fear of making mistakes, a fear of being seen. If you hold steady, the water will tell you who you are, grandmother had said. Pointing to the honest blue of the lake, I pressed the paddle a touch harder, nudged the boat to a new drift, and the current took me what felt like a mile from the shore without my realizing it. The world around me shrank to the color of the lake, and the sound of breath, my own steady, surprised inhale, the whisper of the boat's wooden ribs, the faint, almost prayerful call of a distant loon somewhere beyond the far reeds. And in that slide from shore to open water, I learned what it meant to trust a small thing with a bright future. The paddle, the wind, even my own balance, which seemed to belong not to my legs alone, but to a greater patience that flowed through the lake and into my arms. The moment came gently, not with a shout, but with a quiet, almost shy ache of realization. I was alone with the boat and the water and the sky, and for the first time I understood how much a life can hinge on the simplest choice, to push off or to stay at the edge and pretend you cannot go further. The boat tipped once, an encouraging little tilt, as if the lake itself were nodding at me, saying, "Yes, you can." I corrected, and the correction felt like the kind of forgiveness you give yourself after a stumble. Not perfect, but true. The shore receded, and with it the loudness of fear, and what remained was a small, ringing clarity. I could steer this thing. I could steer my own day a little. I could choose to move towards something beyond the next shade of green. When I finally turned back toward the shore, the lake wore a different face, less a mirror and more a patient landscape, welcoming you back to the known, to the bread and soup and the warm voices on the porch. Grandmother's hand appeared, almost out of nowhere, waving from the dock, and she smiled with that particular kindness old people give to children who have stepped a little taller. I felt my cheeks rise in a shy, proud warmth. And when I stepped onto the boat's wooden edge and the shore grew real again, I steadied the bicycle and rode back toward the house with a little more grace than before, the basket in my arms, the world smaller and larger all at once. That day should have ended with a plan or a promise, something I would tell the grown me to remember on the days when fear felt heavy as a stone in the stomach. Grandmother laid a cool towel on my neck after a moment, a small ritual I would later remember as a reminder that tenderness has its own vocabulary, the language of touch and quiet exhale. That memory, held in the quiet of my old age, is a map of who I became. It was not a grand adventure, not a dramatic turning point marked by a single decisive moment, but a memory of a single summer when I learned to trust the world enough to teach myself how to trust myself. I learned to hear the water's patient voice and to listen to my own, which is perhaps the same thing in different disguises. To listen is to allow the world to answer back in small, steady ways, and to answer back to the world with a small and steady courage of your own. The lake did not scold me for slow progress. It only gave me space to learn, then showed me how to return with a more gentle step and a gaze that could carry both longing and gratitude. In the years since, I have carried that quiet skill into heavier rooms and brighter halls. The hospital wards where a patient's breath is a brief, important confession. The schoolrooms where a shy child learns to raise a hand. The street where a neighbor's sadness needs a steady presence. The chair by the window where rain taps out its soft percussion on the pane and time seems to listen, if only for a moment, to the truth of what it means to be alive and awake to the world around you. I have learned that memory, even when it wears the veil of youth and weathered hands, keeps a bright thread alive. The thread that ties what is to what was and what still could be.